Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called the 10 greatest jazz fusion guitarists of all time, ranked from 10 to 1. This is a big video for me, right? So I've been putting this one off. Okay, it's a difficult choice. What have I based it upon? I've based it upon innovation. I've based it upon the sort of popularity, influence on culture, influence on other musicians, virtuosity, and of course my own personal preference. And that, you know, swings it around. My own personal preference means it's my list. You will have your own list, okay? You haven't come here to see your list, you've come here to see my list. So don't moan if it's not your list, because it won't be your list, it'll be my list. This is my list. My 10 greatest, in my subjective view of everything, my 10 greatest jazz fusion guitarists of all time, right? And of course, we want to go into interesting places and raise discussion. So this first choice at number 10 will perhaps raise the discussion, but I think I've thought about it and I'm going to justify why not Billy Cobham, but Tommy Bolin is on the list of my 10 greatest jazz fusion guitarists of all time. I'll tell you why. It's because Tommy Bolin is an interesting character, right? He wasn't around for very long. He emerges out of, he's in a band which is very jazz fusion called Zephyr, and then he joins the James Gang and he comes through a number of bands. He gets discovered in terms of jazz fusion on this album. Billy Cobham sort of pulls him across to play on here. And what you've got with Tommy Bolin is a guy that's very jazz influenced, but he's an out and out rock guitarist. This is what I feel. I don't think the guy could have played through giant steps, you know, like many of the guitarists on this list. So he brings the rock. Now this album is one of the greatest jazz fusion albums I've ever made, and on here are some of the greatest jazz fusion guitar solos ever, right? Absolute perfection. He then goes on to, Tommy Bolin then goes on to play with Alphonse Mouzon, Mind Transplant, which is another great fusion album with great fusion guitar playing. And then he makes a number of solo albums which have incredible jazz fusion tracks on. Marching Powder by Tommy Bolin with the incredible Narada Michael Walden on drums. And I think, is it Jan Hammer on keyboards? I'm not too sure. But anyway, another fusion classic. So if we start to rank solos and start to look what this guy did, it's undeniable. Yeah, he wasn't around for a long time. By 1976 he was dead from a heroin overdose. I think if he'd have stayed around, we would have seen him working more and more within the jazz fusion thing. But his approach to jazz fusion, which is more on the rock side, is what makes fusion so incredible. I think anybody who knows these solos and knows the importance on this album will agree that this guy has to be at number 10. Right, at number 9, I have this guy, Bill Connors. Alright, Bill Connors was the original guitarist in Return to Forever. He then played on a few fusion albums in the early 70s, not many. This is the other one, major one he played on. In doing this channel, I've realised that this album is one of the greatest fusion albums ever made, with a one-off lineup which seems to span all the great fusion that was out in the early 70s. So we have Stanley Clarke on bass, Jan Hammer on keyboards, Tony Williams on drums, and incredible Bill Collins on guitar, and there's some incredible soloing from him. So what do we get on this album by Bill Connors? Well, what it is, it's just out of control, post-Hendrix, post-John McLaughlin guitar playing. And the thing is with Bill Connors, again like Tommy Bolin, he only did this on a couple of albums. He then signed to ECM and he made an album of classical guitar, which is phenomenal. And for me, ups what he is as a player, makes him more interesting. By the 80s, he returns to jazz fusion, but he sounds like a carbon copy of Alan Holdsworth. It's quite disturbing, actually, that he'd embrace Holdsworth's approach, especially as his approach on these albums was so unlike Holdsworth. Holdsworth is smooth and in control with this incredible legato sound. On here, it's alternate picking doom. It's screaming out of control electric guitar playing. Bill Connors for me is one of the great fusion guitarists has ever been. All right, a lot of the people on this list have come out of the classic fusion period. They were the people laying the foundations of fusion guitar playing. They were the head of what the rock guitarists were doing. They were ahead of what the prog guitarists were doing. They were pushing the technique out. And Bill Connors is one of those guitar players. So that's who I've got at number 9. Who have I got at number 8? Oh, what? This is one of my favourite guitarists, full stop. This guy exemplifies what is great about jazz fusion. That bridge between jazz guitar, rock guitar and blues. You know, the perfect jazz fusion guitarist would be a pinch of Wes Montgomery, a smidgen of Steve Ray Vaughan, and a little touch of Jimmy Page. And this guy is that. It's the incredible Scott Henderson. And I've pulled out this album, the Zawinul Syndicate albums with Scott Henderson. I feel is where Scott Henderson came into his element. He emerges in the 80s. He has his own fusion band called Tribal Tech. Tribal Tech were really, you know, waving the fusion flag through the 80s. They were one of the few bands that was making proper fusion, not awful sounding Fusac, you know, not Kenny G, not any of that. Tribal Tech kicked. They really kicked. Then he joined Chick Corea's Electric Band, and we all know when Scott Henderson was in it, that was when they were at their best. The first album's fantastic because Scott Henderson has got that grit and dirt, as well as that almost Alan Holdsworthian touch on the guitar. But I think once he joins Zawinul, right, it seems to add something to his playing. And I think what it is that Zawinul would not let Scott Henderson go down the jazz route. He wanted rock. Okay, he'd got a virtuoso jazz musician there, but he wanted rock. On this album, there's a couple of jazz standards. There's Monk's Mood and Little Rooty Tooty. And watching interviews with Scott Henderson, he's mentioned that Zawinul would not let him play the changes. It's really interesting. I absolutely love Scott Henderson. I think he is the jazz fusion guitar. He embodies what is incredible about jazz fusion guitar. His playing is always delightful, interesting. His phrasing is incredible. His tone is phenomenal. His composition's fantastic. I can't say enough about it. He's too low on the list, really, but I have tried to keep some objectivity in. So at number 7 is that we have Scott Henderson. At number 6, I have another rock guy, Jeff Beck. Alright, and I decided to pull this one out because this is a fantastic fusion album. All the way through the 70s, Beck was making jazz fusion. Jeff Beck had come from the British rock scene. He's an out-and-out rock guitarist, albeit an utter individual. You know, that's right at the beginning of rock guitar playing in the mid-60s, this guy's a pioneer. Right, of the era that he comes out of Hendrix and Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton. He is by far the most interesting, the most individual of those players, and in a way the most virtuoso as well. And he brings, it's not just rock guitar playing, he brings bits of like rockabilly playing in there, bits of like rock and roll, bits of Indian, you know, music. It's an incredible player. So when Jeff Beck moved towards fusion after hearing John McLaughlin in the early 70s, and he starts making albums by Blow and Wired and this one, he really lays the foundation. Now I've gone back to these albums recently because I love Narada Michael Walden so much, and I've been revisiting those albums. And what shocked me is how incredible Jeff Beck's guitaring is. He's an absolute individual. There's nobody like him, and he has contributed to some of the greatest jazz fusion guitar playing ever, without a doubt. So that's who I've got at number 6. Right, who have I got at number 5? This guy is one of my favourite guitar players, and I feel is so underrated. and it's Larry Coryell, the architect of jazz fusion guitar, the first. He's there at the beginning with the Free Spirits, right? With Gary Burton, with Chico Hamilton. This guy's there at the start, right? This is the guy that was able to take jazz virtuoso guitar playing, Tal Farlow, Charlie Christian, Wes Montgomery, right, and fuse it with rock, and he fuses it with rock when rock is still in its infancy, all right. He lays the foundation for that, and actually, if you listen to Larry Coryell's guitar playing, it is entirely unique. He is untouched by the later greats like John McLaughlin, right? You could tell his influence in what he tries to do with his career, but in terms of his own guitar playing, Larry Coryell has his own unique way of playing, which for me is so interesting in terms of the phrasing. This is something that never gets mentioned with Larry Coryell. Larry Coryell is a master phraser. This guy played with Gary Burton. You don't get away with that unless you really can seriously play. And he is a master at phrasing. And the way he brings that heavy phrasing approach to jazz fusion guitar is incredible. His guitar solos are always brilliant. Now, I think throughout the 70s, when he should have been a leader, he never quite gets in the flow of what is going on. He never quite gets the right project or the right concept. Although I think that the 11th House are one of the great jazz fusion bands of the 70s. As great as Return to Forever, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, I think that introducing the 11th House level 1 aspects, just incredible jazz fusion albums. This guy is the real deal. Larry Coryell, the architect, the daddy, if you want. So, who have we got as? So this is at number 5. I always lose count when I do these videos. Another giant. This guy is the dominant guitarist of the later phase of jazz fusion. Of course, when guys like Larry Coryell and John McLaughlin and Aldi Meola emerge, they create a way of doing jazz fusion guitar playing, and it takes a very strong individual voice to shift that to something else, and this guy did that, and that's Pat Metheny. Not only did he do it, but he went on to sell millions of albums. Pat Metheny is an incredible guitar player and completely unlike anybody else on this list. Compositionally, absolutely brilliant, and he's an out-and-out fusion musician. He has a different take on fusion, which actually goes back again to Gary Burton. Gary Burton's band has produced a number with Mick Goodrick, another of the great fusion guitarists. And I think what you get with Gary Burton is the influence of the Beatles, the influence of that sort of song-like compositional approach. And then Pat Metheny takes that and he runs with it. And he's so open to other music styles. You know, he can make beautiful or easy listening music. Not easy playing, but easy listening. But he can go from there to avant-garde jazz, to free jazz, to electronica, to dance music, to heavy metal. He's a fusion guitarist in the pure, true sense of the word, right? And he's been a dominant influence on the last 40 years of guitar playing. This next guy has also exerted a huge influence. If you listen to so many jazz fusion guitarists working today, you will hear an influence from this guy, who again, like Scott Henderson, but in his own way has been able to fuse the virtuosity of Wes Montgomery with the blues and with the dirt of rock, and that's of course the mighty John Scofield. Right, what a voice on guitar. Okay, the thing with Scofield that's impressed me as time has gone on is this is a virtuoso guitar player. This guy can fly. But actually, as time gone on, he has become more and more economic, and he's able to say so much with just a few notes. Throughout the 80s, I would say him and Scott Henderson and Pat Metheny are the three greatest fusion artists around. Although, of course, I'm going to I have to say, with Bill Laswell as well. I would say they would be the four. But Bill Laswell was creating a much more weirder version of fusion, you know. But I think with the Dennis Chambers band, he was really laying like Pat Metheny, a new groundwork for fusion that so many people have built upon. Especially like all those gospel chops musicians. I don't think they would exist without that 80s band. This is another fantastic album with it's called Still Warm. And this is with Omar Hakim on drums, Darryl Jones on bass, Don Grolny on keyboards, and of course John on guitar. John Schofield, monster. Right, so we're down to the big three now, okay? You know the guys I haven't mentioned. And at number 3, we have one of the undeniable greats, Aldi Meola. Did you check out the recent interview with Rick Beato and Aldi Meola? And what was impressive about that is Al plays so much in it. He just wants to play, right? He just wants to play, and he sat there with an acoustic guitar and the music's pouring out of him. And the stuff he's playing is so incredible, and it's so virtuoso, and it's unlike anything that I've heard Aldi Meola do. He's still pushing the envelope. He is still pushing guitar playing, and it's not just a shallow display of virtuosity. He plays like that because there's an amalgamation of jazz and rock, but it's also amalgamated with Latin American music and flamenco, and at some point even like Eastern European music, and now Indian classical music. And there's a rhythmical influence, especially from Latin American and flamenco, which Aldi Meola infuses onto electric guitar through his picking, and that's what makes him so unique. Of course, when everyone heard someone playing the guitar at that sort of speed in the 70s, it rewrote the book. This is one of the great shredders, and all prog metal and metal guitarists, you know, owe so much to Aldi Meola. He was the first guy. There's no Yngwie Malmsteen without Aldi Meola. So that's who I have got at number 3. The incredible Aldi Meola, still hitting it, still incredible. So I sat down here with these 2 guitarists left and thought, who's going to be number 1? All right, until I hit record, this guy was number 1. And then I thought, no, I'm going to have to put it at number 2. So at number 2, John McLaughlin. I might be making a mistake here, but I'll try and justify this. Now, anyone who knows this channel knows that this channel wouldn't exist without John McLaughlin. Right, this channel started up when I made a ranking video of the Mahavishnu Orchestra for fun. Okay, I am this guy's biggest fan. This is my number 1 guy. And this is one of the greatest guitarists who's ever lived, an utter virtuoso, but also this is the guy that really comes in and creates jazz fusion guitar playing, creates jazz fusion with the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And he has consistently kept going, and at the age of 80 he's currently out on tour, killing everybody. I chatted to a mate of mine who went to see him, and he said it was astonishing. My friend James Maiden, who is a fabulous guitar player and also a brilliant music teacher and educator, and he went to see John McLaughlin, and he said it was incredible to sit in a big room with thousands of people watching such avant-garde electric mayhem going on. And then he said, then they finished and did an encore of You Know, and everybody walked out singing it because it was so hooky. This is the genius of the bloke, right? But he's at number 2. Who have I got at number 1? It's this guy, it's Alan Holdsworth. For me, Alan Holdsworth is the greatest musician of the last 50 years. Everything that you want to be as a musician, Alan Holdsworth is. He is technically astonishing to this day. Guitarists cannot get their head round what he was doing on the guitar. And his technical guitar approach to guitar was entirely made by him. Right? People talk about legato in guitar, But Holdsworth was doing legato in the early 70s and is taking it further past anybody else in history, and he's still astonishing. But his approach to chord playing, his approach to composition, his approach to the guitar sound, his approach to the way the guitar's built, his approach to the way he uses amps, the way he uses the gauge of strings he uses, the way he phrases, everything about him is not only entirely individual, but has been developed to such a high rate, right? He takes what John Coltrane did and goes beyond it. Sorry, he goes beyond it. This is perhaps the greatest jazz musician of the last 50 years. And the older I get, and the more I listen to Alan Holdsworth, the more I just think this is the product of the second 20th century, you know, where a certain period has its Mozart, another period has its Bach. And if we look at the last 50 years, it's possibly this guy is the greatest of them all on any instrument in any way, shape or form. And it has to be the guitar, because the guitar is the dominant instrument of the second part of the 20th century. In the same way that the trumpet and the saxophone is the dominant instrument at the beginning part of the 20th century. And of course, the computer and the sampler is the dominant instrument of so far this century. Alan Holdsworth's the peak. He's the daddy of it all. He's the one. He has to be number one on this list. He's astonishing. So that's why I put him at number one. Moan as much as you like, John McLaughlin fans. But that's the way it is. It's my channel. It's my list. It's my channel. So that's how we get to the number one on my list of the greatest jazz fusion guitarists of all time. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.